Hello, everyone. So the time right now is 12:03, and we're gonna begin. I think we have a good number of people has already joined us, and whoever join in will just join as we are going with the presentation. Before we start, I would like to say that this session is being recorded, so please make sure your video is off and the microphone is muted. The session today was organized by the OPWA Young Professionals Group. I'm Tanya Zlateva, the group's chair, and I will be co-hosting it with Faria Manan, who is the vice chair. As we have some participants who are not part of the YP group, I would like to take a few minutes and say a few words about OPWA, and for those of you who are not familiar with the organization. OPWA is a non-profit organization whose mission is to connect all professionals in the public works community. The organization is the Ontario chapter of the Canadian Public Works Association, also known as CPWA, and the American Public Works Association, APWA. OPWA members include public works practitioners who are employed by federal and provincial governments, municipalities, consulting engineers, utility companies, contractors, and suppliers. If you'd like to join the Young Professionals group and learn more about OPWA, feel free to email me anytime after this session. I also want to take a few minutes to bring your attention to the OPWA sponsors who help us make events like this one happen and many other. Many of our Young Professional group members are also part of our sponsors organizations, so thank you all for your support. Before we start, I want to say a few words about things you should keep in mind during the presentation. As I mentioned, the session is recorded, so please make sure your video is off and the microphone is muted at all times. We will have time for questions, but they will be addressed at the end of the webinar. You can post your questions at the chat window at any time during the presentation. If you're not familiar with Zoom, to open the chat window, move your cursor to the bottom edge of your screen. This will open the lower taskbar in Zoom, and you can select the chat option to post your questions. So now, enough talking from me. I want to take the floor to Adriano Meme and Dan Dickinson, who are from WSP and our speakers for today's webinar. And I would like them to introduce themselves and talk about their experience and knowledge. Thank you, Adriano and Dan, for joining us today, and enjoy, everyone.
Thanks, Tanya. Can everybody see your screen?
Yeah, looks good, Adriano.
Okay, good. So my name's Adriano Memi. I've been working with WSP for almost 9.5 years now. I work in the contract administration for land development, senior project engineer. Dan, do you want to introduce yourself for a quick sec?
Yeah, thanks, Adriano. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dan Dickinson. I'm a contract administrator with WSP. I've been working with them for 4 years now, working mostly in our infrastructure, water and wastewater department.
Great. So today we're going to be talking about health and safety risk management. We're going to talk about the role of a contract administrator. Dan's going to be talking about his role and his projects with the City of Toronto, the Watermain Rehabilitation Program. And then I'll be talking about contract administration more in the land development role.
All right, so like any good construction engineering company, the highest priority is safety. So we're going to start our presentation just briefly talking about health and safety and our considerations as contract administrators. So as CAs and contract administrators are out on site a lot more often dealing with construction, so PPE is very important. So obviously knowing what PPE is required for your project sites before going out, making sure it's well maintained and properly ready for your work on site, and then make sure that we're always wearing it, even depending on where we're working. So even if you're on, say, a city street and it doesn't feel like you quite need PPE, we're making sure that we're always dressed to impress our clients and working safely. And then just keeping in mind that PPE is very important and your last line of defense for common safety concerns on site.
So with WSP, how we approach health and safety, we have a few protocols that we do for all our staff who go to site. So we have something called a PRAS, which is project level risk assessment that we need to fill out. That's more a general scope of the project, and it identifies all the hazards that you'll encounter for the project. Also identifies who's participating in the project and what they need in terms of for training regarding health and safety. We have our field level risk assessment. That's more of like every day, every time you go to a site, you need to fill one of these out. And then we started going online with safety apps, which similar to field level risk assessment, but it's all online. So safety work practices and procedures. Basically, you're doing your WMIS, you're doing, if you ever need a machete, you put that down. Remote control boat, you know, you never know where you live, working beside a lake and stuff. You need to get those shots. So, but yeah, it's mainly like for everything to do with the project itself.
Yeah, and I think kind of those examples, Adriano, it just goes to show WSP, we're a large company, and there's a lot of different risks that we can be exposed to. So WSP does a great job identifying all kinds of different risks that we might face and how to deal with them when you're on site. And then kind of getting more into our like what a contract administrator does. Sorry, this is just kind of a wall of text. We're just gonna, I'm gonna need that wall of text, Adriano.
Sorry.
No worries. So I'm just gonna read through this quickly so you guys kind of get a brief understanding of what our day-to-day life is like and what we're responsible for. So a contract administrator typically is a scope manager. So they're a clear interpreter of the project documents to avoid any conflicts. So being between your client and typically the contractor. Schedule management, so identifying any slippage in the schedule and verifying any delays. And then suggestions or monitoring extra efforts to bring the schedule back on track or speed up things if that's needed. And then change management, so identifying any change in the project scope of construction, which is usually defined by the contract or the drawings, the engineering drawings. And then monitor and record all these changes obviously in the field, so taking pictures and notes, and then identify the impact of the changes on the schedule, and then obviously alerting our client about all this.
Other things would be quality management. So maintain quality of your project, inspect contractors' workmanship compared to specifications and standards. You're arranging third-party inspections, which is mainly geotechnical consultants to come on site and take some tests. You're maintaining records of testing and site inspections. You have your budget management. You want to make sure your project's in line with your budget. You have to alert the client and any other stakeholders for potential issues. Manage the use of contingency funds with the client approvals. Also, project communication coordination. So when the contractor starts submitting RFIs, RFQs, there's change directives, change orders, you gotta make sure this information flows between all parties. And you're also coordinating with design contractor, the client PMs, third-party inspections, and commissioning agents.
And then here's just kind of a list of typical responsibilities we would deal with maybe on a day-to-day basis. So obviously working closely with our client and keeping them in the loop of what's going on daily with construction and the issues. We go out to site for any reviews, typically on the CA level, which is usually above an inspector. You're reviewing more of complicated construction issues and any changes to the project scope. We share meeting minutes with the contractor and the clients. So this is more of a discussion of how things are going with the whole group. Conflict resolution on site, whether it be people or equipment or the materials, it could be a whole array of different things. Progress payments, so this is paying the contractor. Correspondence with the RFIs and submittals, like Adriano mentioned. Drafting and reviewing change notices, change directives, and change orders. So those are when the scope of the engineering work has changed due to whatever was found on site during construction. And then deficiency reviews, so any products that the contractor installs, we review to make sure that it's what the client is wanting, and if it's not, how to rectify it with the contractor. And then engineering letters, so this is letter of submittal completion, preliminary acceptance packages, letter of credit reduction requests, final assumptions, to name a few. So this is just signing off on construction when things are near completion. And then finally, contract negotiations, so obviously the day-to-day, what's going on site, and making sure the contractor is getting paid appropriately, and pretty much being an unbiased reviewer of construction.
So other things that we do would be more of the contract disputes. So when a contractor is submitting their time and material sheets for extras, our responsibility is to review those submittals and confirm about all the hours, all the equipment and material that's being submitted, if it's correct. We do this by taking daily notes of site activities. That will help us negotiate with the contractor. Then in order to get experience with this, one, it's important to be on projects, seeing that the work being done, but also you could take courses through the OGRA, which they provide contract dispute courses as well. So yeah. There you go.
There we go. Thanks, Adriano. All right, so we're going to get into, this is Dan Dickinson. We're going to talk about my work with the City of Toronto, more specifically Toronto Water, our client, on the Watermain Rehabilitation Program. There's a picture with me on the right with a police officer and the contractor site staff, obviously before COVID, or else we'd be social distancing there. And we'll get started. I promise there's going to be more pictures now. Sorry about the wall of text earlier. It's kind of hard to put those into pictures, but we'll talk about my project here with the City of Toronto. So like I said, Toronto Water is our client, and we work all around Toronto. So we're in East York, Etobicoke, North York, Scarborough, all over the city. The method we use, it's called a cured in place piping, CIPP lining. It's a trenchless method for rehabilitating existing water main by building a new pipe inside the existing pipe. So rather than the typical open cut, the liner is installed in the existing water main rather than installing a new pipe system. And what this does is it extends the life cycle of the existing water main, and it is generally less expensive than doing an open cut replacement. And then during this replacement, substandard water services, so for domestic and fire, those are also replaced during our program. And then those pictures there are just kind of examples of the pre and post liners. So as you can see, the old pipes there, those are cast iron. They're very full of iron deposits. So we clean all that out and install the new clean liner there. And it's a nice circular shape. Go to the next slide, Adriana. All right, and then here's just kind of an overview of our program as a whole. So there's a picture at the bottom of our project team. We're pretty big. There's about 20, 25 of us. So last year there was 10 inspectors, 4 contract administrators, and 1 senior PM just on our contract administration side. We were dealing with 2 contractors last year for PAL Construction Limited. I saw that they were one of the OPWA sponsors, and then RB Somerville. So they're a big contractor in Toronto as well. We had 9 active contracts and over 40 active construction sites. The total construction value since this program was introduced in 2015 in the city is over $300 million now we've done in construction value, which equates to about 175 kilometers of water main replacement since 2015. And we work closely with our engineering team at WSP. We have field ambassadors who are planners that deal with the public. And then, of course, the Toronto Water PMs and transportation with the city as well. So to put things in perspective, we made this cool infographic. So there we got the famous CN Tower, which is about 553 meters tall. And then to put that into perspective, the next slide shows how much water main lining we've done in Toronto since the inception of our program. So as you can see, I think it looks quite substantial there when you put it like that. cool little infographic one of our colleagues made. So it's about 315 CN towers we would have lined by now in water main length, and it's only growing. So at the start of our project, typically how we would get our construction going, we have to notify the public. So that involves pre-construction and construction notices. So this is important. We're dealing on city streets, so the public takes priority in making sure that they're fully aware of what's going on and who to contact if they have any questions about the work, and of course how to keep themselves safe. And then from there, once we notify the public, we are concerned with our permits and approvals with the city. So some permits we might deal with are road cut permits, road disruption activity reports. So that's for transportation, let them know what construction is going on, determining our work hours, and then dealing with other permitting agencies depending where the work is. So some you might deal with our TRCA, CN Rail, Toronto Parks, Urban Forestry, to name a few. And then here's just some examples of our typical construction drawings. So the one up top, that's called a pit map. That shows all the areas where excavations would be done on the street. And then we use numbering to keep track of the excavations. And then on the bottom, we have our bypass plan, it's called. I'll explain what the bypass is later, but that's just kind of how it looks. As I mentioned earlier, we have to work with transportation since we are working on city streets in Toronto, and how we manage our traffic in the city is very important. Obviously, traffic in Toronto is a big topic, so we got to make sure that we're doing our best to try to keep traffic flowing smoothly during our work and how we're trying to keep the public safe. So how we do that is obviously reviewing what's called the OTM Book 7, Ontario Traffic Manual, and we work with transportation and the contractor to develop traffic plans that's agreeable and gets the contractor on the road and make sure they're doing their work safely. And then for the water main structural lining, it's a kind of like a factory process. So here's just kind of like a listing of the steps, and it generally goes in the sequence in this list. So you can start the next step before completing the other, and I'm going to go through each step in this list here and describe kind of what the process is briefly. So first we start with locates. Obviously before you dig, you need to figure out what's underground. So before the contractor starts their excavation work, they get locates done typically by two companies in Toronto, ProMark and PVS contractors. So they would typically provide the contractor with any hydro, gas, or any other utilities of reference underground. And the contractor uses this to make sure that the excavations are safe. Toronto, there's always lots of stuff underground, so it's always interesting to see what you find. And then next we can move on to our bypass piping. So as I mentioned before in that drawing, we use a bypass system, which essentially is a temporary water main on the surface. So since we are working on the existing water main underground, that means we have to turn it off. And in order to make sure people still have water supply during the projects, which normally last a few months at least, they use the temporary bypass. And what the bypass does is that you can see some of the pictures. There's some examples of connections to the temporary water services. So the bypass is used to supply water temporarily to the businesses and residential homes, either underground or directly through their hose bibs on the side of houses. And then that's obviously chlorinated the same way water main would, so it's the same type of water quality. And then onto the fun part, excavation. So here's just some pictures of our excavation work. First picture, that's a backhoe excavating in the middle of a road, the Queensway, major arterial road in Toronto. Next, we got the hydrovac. So we use hydrovac a lot when there's utilities underground that makes it difficult for mechanical excavation. You typically are supposed to use the saw cutter before you remove the asphalt and concrete to make sure it's a clean cut. And then from there, we try to keep records of all the underground materials, like depths and asphalt and concrete for contractor payment during restorations. Picture 5, that's a wooden shoring box that we place around the lining access pits. So the lining access pits are where we use to access the water main, and the contractor does their work through these pits. And that's a wooden shoring box that's built around the water main to keep the workers safe while they're working on the water main. And then picture 6, that's a steel plate over one of the access pits. So similar to what picture 5 looks like. And that's used to make sure that it's over a sidewalk so pedestrians can still pass over the pit safely while there's no construction work going on. And then when the pits aren't in a place that cars or foot traffic isn't blocked, they do a pit like that in picture 7, which extends above the ground and has safety signage and boarding to keep the public out. All right. And then because we're working on old infrastructure, Watermain Breaks isn't uncommon on this project. So I included some pictures here from my own site inspections back in the day. The top picture is from nearby Ryerson. We had a 50-foot water main break there. It was pretty epic, but also scary. So it's just a reminder that they're working with dangerous materials and high pressures. So keeping distance and being aware of what's going on every day is very important. And then that's like the follow-up picture below it. It got covered and the water main shut off. So part of our work as WSP is coordinating with Toronto Water and alerting them of any water main breaks and giving them information of how to isolate the water main so that the contractor can make repairs. All right, and then cleaning. So once the excavations are done and the water main has been turned off and everyone's connected to the bypass system, the lining procedures can commence. So the first step is cleaning. So the contractor uses several different methods to clear out that debris that you saw on the old pipes on one of the first slides there from my project. And they use different methods. So there's like a scraper, or they use water pressure to clear away all that old iron and try to get the circumference circular as possible before they start the lining installation. And then prior to installing the liner, they use CCTV and robots to do inspections of the host pipe, we call it. So that's the pipe before the liner is installed. And then the CCTV, they use a robot to check the pipe to make sure it's in good enough condition for a liner installation. And then they also, for their small water services, there's little holes in the water main, so they have to cork those before installing the liner. So they use a robot. You can see in the top right corner, there's a robot installing a cork, and then the picture below it is the picture of the cork, what it looks like. It's glued in, and then eventually when the liner gets installed, that gets drilled out. So that's pretty cool that they use kind of a higher technology to install these liners, and they use some robots and cameras internally. And that brings us into the meat and potatoes for our project is the actual liner installation. So typically how the liner is installed is through those access pits. So it would go from one pit to another through the dead water main. The water main is typically, the pits are usually about, say, 100 meters of separation between them. So they install, say, the liner in like 100-meter segments. And what they do to install the liner is they pull it from one pit to the other using a winch, it's called. And while they're pulling it through the pipe, they inject a resin into the liner, epoxy resin. And once the liner is fully pulled through and put into place, they inject the resin. They have the water, boiling water pressure, push the liner to the shape of the existing hose pipe. And then through the boiling water, the resin reacts chemically and goes into the fabric of the liner you see there in the pictures. And that's what causes the fabric to harden with the resin and create the shape of the hose pipe. And then that's graded structurally the same as PVC, the liner inside. So you essentially have a new water main inside the old one, which should last ideally another 50 years, which is typically what the length of a water main is graded for. You try to aim for 40, 50 years, so it's doubling the life expectancy. And then part of our work, we're not only upgrading the water main, we're also upgrading the parts of the water main on the side branches. So that includes any hydrants, any services from the water main to the property line that are substandard. And then that also includes all the parts of the water main along it. So that's like valving, installing PVC in the access pits once they're completed. And obviously our part as a contract administrator and inspectors is to make sure that they're installing everything properly as per the city's standard drawings and specifications, and making sure that the city is getting the product that they're paying for. And of course, we want to make sure the contractor is working safely. All right, and then of course, with water mains, chlorination is very important. Make sure everyone's getting clean water. So we do disinfection of our bypass system as well as the water main, and that's all done same regulations as the MOE for typical PVC water main. And then use different sample points for all of our side branches. So usually every large service or side street gets in part of a sample point, and those results get sent to a lab. And if we get passing results, then we can tell the city if the water main is good to turn on and reinstate. And then here's just an example of some of our daily reports. So like we were mentioning, we have to keep track of staff that are on site for the contractors, so what their role is and how long they were on site. Of course, the equipment they're using as well, and then also any contract items that were completed that day. So as you can see, there can be quite a lot of workers on the site and a lot of equipment. It's a pretty busy project. Lots can be going on. And then for any changes of work, so that's the changes of scope that we mentioned, we do extra work reports, which specifically describes the change in work and what time and material was used to do that work. And then once we get near the end of our projects, we do our final inspections and holdback releases. So typically for contracts, there's a 10% holdback to try and ensure that the contractor is actually delivering on their promise of the contract. So once they've appeased all requirements, we can release that 10% holdback, and we use the Construction Lien Act to evaluate if the contractor is within substantial completion. So that's just a calculation they use to determine the value of work outstanding compared to the value of the contract. And then once that's satisfied, we can give them their holdback release, and then we enter a warranty period. So any issues that pop up typically 2 years after the project, the contractor is responsible for rectifying. And from the CA side, we do follow-up inspection and warranty inspections to make sure everything's okay. All right, that's it. Adriano, you're next.
So I'm just going to talk about and elaborate a little bit more about contract administration for land development. So this is me, one of my sanitary trunk sewer projects. This was a big project. It was installing about 5 kilometers of a sanitary trunk sewer, about 20 meters deep. So it was more mining rather than open excavation. So I'm sitting right now in a tunnel boring machine. This was the driver's seat for the TBM. You can see it's pretty tight space. So me being 6'2", it was a hard time for me to be in there for an hour. Imagine the actual operator being there for a full day. So common types of projects that we see, so we have a lot of site plans, which mean like box unit stores, even like condos, providing the services and the top works for the basically the site. Like I said, the condo here, these are all projects that we've been working on. We have subdivisions. These are a little bit larger scaled, imagining the size of the subdivision. So for example, this subdivision here is our McClung subdivision for Empire. This, I believe, is 1,500 lots. It's a 15-phase subdivision. So you can imagine how big it is. We do pumping stations. So pumping stations providing sanitary flow and discharge from big subdivisions like the McClung, the one in Caledonia. Also for providing higher pressures to remote communities. We do earthworks and other as well. So a lot of stripping of topsoil and grading, as well as retaining walls. So we do some retaining walls as well. So it's important being on the field and being in contract administration, you should have site awareness, which means you're going on site, you're going to be around heavy equipment, a lot of moving equipment. You want to be aware of your surroundings. You want to make sure you're making eye contact with the operators. Always respect the machines because obviously it could lead to tragedy. So here, this is a typical open cut method for installing sewer and water main. But things like to note basically is like beside the trench boxes, it's not backfilled totally, or you want to make sure you have your railings on your trench boxes. Another thing that you want to look out for is any linear cracking. You could see to the right of the trench box, about maybe 2 meters to the right, there's some linear cracking. That's indication of the soil and earth underneath you that it's caving in. So these are little things and tricks that you get familiar with while working on site. Something that we do now in land development and contract administration is we like to do constructability reviews. So what this is basically the designers and our CA group communicate before a project's released, going for construction and for tendering. So we like to review drawings at second submission and then also another review for the contract and tender drawings. So these are two examples of some constructability issues that could have been identified prior to the project starting. So the one on the left is a manhole. We're actually installing TTC tracks. So the line that's going on the manhole lid is the rail for one of the rail systems for the TTC. So obviously you see this wasn't picked up beforehand, and we just had to remod the handle, the manhole cover to the left. The picture to the right, again, it's discharge of groundwater flow. Ended up going from different swales, and at the end of it all, it ended up in this owner's property, flooding out his front of the yard. You can see here, so this is an example of one of our projects downtown. So you can see how complicated it could get with a lot of the existing infrastructure that's in the ground. So to design a sewer and water main around all this, you have to take into account all your heights of different utilities. Also, being downtown Toronto, I'm sure Dan could relate, is that there's a lot of unknowns that you don't know that's there. A lot of things that the locators won't pick up, which you need them to pick up. There's another example of a conflict on site. So on a drawing, you show Toronto hydro manhole or chamber, which is to the left. You see that manhole cover there. You might show that on the drawings as just a circle and just show like the manhole lid, but in reality, that chamber is a lot larger than just the circle, right? So installing a manhole, we need to do some shifting of all the new infrastructure just to get around this hydro chamber. And like I said before, like you don't know what's in the ground. So this is an example of one of our projects where we're installing a new sanitary sewer. Came across shoring pile or sheet piling, not expected to be there. So first thing you do, don't panic. The contractor is going to probably be looking for you and already hinting you that there's going to be extras, which they're entitled to if it's unknown. But there's always a solution. So in this case, we had the liners cut. There was nothing that they were supporting really. It was all backfilled. So they cut them out and then off they went to continue with the works. So site example, again, this is an example of earthworks. You can see how large the project is. There's lots of machinery on site. Sediment and erosion control is an example of every site basically would have sediment and erosion control to some sort of degree. And then it's important to also do your inspections weekly and after every rainfall event to make sure there's no deficiencies with the silt fence. So on the right, the picture on the right shows just the pooling of water and it breached some of the erosion control. Again, same thing with this. So stable slopes, basically with groundwater washing out, they water is going to find its natural path to flow, right? So you'll get some erosion on different slopes and swales, and you want to make sure the contractor takes care of this with stabilizing and filling in basically all the swales that are being formed. So site servicing, when you get into these big subdivisions, you'll have two, three, even four different crews going at it at once. This is one of our projects out west. You could see it's very large scale. Again, lots of machinery, a lot of things to see, but you want to be careful also that you're not walking around like big mounds that machinery can't see you. Picture at the bottom right is an example of a tunnel boring or jack and bore. So this is a method that usually you'll see when you're installing a sewer underneath a bridge, or now you see them a lot under like the 401 or even the DVP, like major highways. This is a trenchless method. So you're not actually doing any disturbance to the road itself. So you do this from one pit, and then on the other side of the road, you do another pit where that tunnel or that liner would pop through. Like I said before, this is an example of a retaining wall. I'm sure most of you might have done this experiment in university where you build a retaining wall out of toilet paper with sand. You'll see the tiebacks here. We do noise barrier walls. So this you'll find kind of like alongside with highways and railroad, major railroad tracks. We do airport works. This is a project at Toronto Pearson Airport. There's a new screening facility, so we deal with all the buildings and construction of new storm and groundwater system. This is the project that I talked about right at the beginning of when you saw a picture of me in the tunnel boring machine. So you can see how deep it is. And then on this project, because it was in Hamilton, we were allowed to blast. So in the picture on the right, you'll see the blast mats. You can see the core drill holes that have all the explosives already loaded. This is a picture of the tunnel boring machine that we used. We do a lot of stormwater storage tanks. This is a lot common now for site plans. Basically, what it does is it controls your amount of flow or discharge that you're allowing to leave the site. So if you have restrictions, like different cities and municipalities have restrictions to how much can be discharged to the city infrastructure, so you would install a stormwater storage tank to help reduce that flow into the city infrastructure. Do a lot of top works as well, so a lot of sidewalks, top curb, re base curb, then top curb, a lot of parking lots as well. And that's it. So I guess, Tanya, I'll give it back to you if there's any questions for Dan and myself.
Thank you, Adriano. Thank you, Dan, for both of you for speaking. So everyone, we have about 15 minutes. You can ask any questions you would like to do, just post them in the window, and Faria is gonna read them out. Again, just post them in the chat window. We have a few questions that we also prepare in advance that we wanted to ask them. I would pass it on now to Faria to start the Q&A session.
So one of the first questions was, what is the most challenging part of your job?
Dan, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure, I'll start. So I would say the most challenging part of my job is actually maybe not so much the construction side, is actually more of the people side. So being a contract administrator, you're kind of the middleman. So you have to put on a lot of masks, and you deal with a lot of different types of people with a lot of different types of backgrounds. So we obviously work closely with our engineering staff. So you have to have an idea of how to work with design and technical minded people. And then, of course, we deal with the construction side. So you're dealing with construction workers of all different types of personalities, we'll say. So people in construction can be pretty passionate and get in a lot of intense conversations. So being able to deal with those types of people and conduct yourself professionally, and obviously having your client and the project's the best mind. So kind of like being emotionally intelligent is a big part of the role, I find. And it's also with my project, I deal a lot with the city of Toronto and working on public streets. So we deal with hundreds, if not thousands, of residents a year, and we have to deal with any complaints and try to resolve any complaints, regardless of how obscene they may be. We have to try and work with the residents. So yeah, we get a lot of different characters every year, and that can be challenging as well. So yeah, definitely the people side is what keeps things interesting and keeps you on your toes, and trying to remind yourself about being emotionally intelligent, like I said, and try to deal with everyone professionally and with courtesy.
Yeah, for myself, I agree with Dan. I think that's something that's important with our roles. I think also for me, it was getting to know the project. Being a first time, I remember my first couple of years in contract administration. You're going on site, you're dealing with basically experts that do this every day, and they're asking you questions about what's to be installed, and they're asking you questions that are in specifications and stuff. So to know your specifications, to know your standards, also to know the project itself, I think that's very hard. I mean, over time you get used to it because you see it every day, and with every project you see different things, so you'll be able to provide those quick responses to the contractors. But you want to make sure that the contractor is not walking all over us or all over you and taking advantage of not installing and not doing the project properly.
The second question I have is, how experienced were you when you started the CA role? And did you have any prior design experience in those specific projects that you were the CA of?
You want to start this one, Adriano, or should I go?
Sure. So I had some previous experience in the civil field. I was working for a couple contractors beforehand, which taught me how to read drawings and kind of get a general understanding of how a project flows. Getting into the contract administrative role with WSP, at the time, the MMM group, they taught us how to basically carry a project all the way through to the end. Being put on a lot of different projects that helped a lot with the experience as well. So, Dan, you want to go?
Yeah, thanks, Adriano. That's good. For myself, the background, I'm a McMaster University grad, so I did civil engineering and management there. So obviously with school, you get some design experience, and I took a year off during school to work for a consultant other than WSP. And I did land development and infrastructure design while I was working there for a year. And then when I joined WSP in 2016, I started as a designer. So I worked as a designer for about a year, working mostly on land development and municipal infrastructure design. And for myself, I'm more of a busybody, so I like to more of like the people side and being out and about. So I kind of want to transition more into CA. So in my second year, I kind of transitioned more to being an inspector, working on. So it was cool actually. I did design for the Watermain rehab project a little bit before I got onto it as an inspector and a site staff. So I had experience with more kind of the design side, and then got into inspection for 2 years. And then after 2 years, I guess I did a good job and got promoted to a contract administrator. And I've been doing that for almost 2 years now. So I've been pretty much working mostly on the Watermain rehab project for 3-4 years, majority of my time since joining WSP.
All right, so if anyone else has any questions, feel free to enter it into the chat, and we have about 10 minutes to cover any questions. If not, we can call it for today. And if you have any other questions, you can always email us and we can get back to you with that.
Okay, so I see some questions are coming up for you.
So have either of you had any experience with new adjudication process?
I have. So I've actually done a course with adjudication, being basically a mediator. I think there's, so being in contract admin, I think there's two sides. So you have to know how to mediate when the contractor comes with you or comes to you with extras, because you're going to have two sides of the story. So you'll have the contractor side, they're pushing to get their extra paid. Then you have the client pushing back, and basically they don't want to pay any extras. So that's some experience there. But with the like actual mediation, I've been to one mediation where there's a professional mediator. Basically, they listen to both sides of the story. It's important to have your notes all in order and in place, because that's something that they look and refer to. It's a little bit intimidating at first, but as long as you have everything recorded, then everything works out at the end.
Yeah, I personally have not had experience with that. I think that's a big thing that came around with the new Construction Lien Act this year, is if there's any disputes that can't be settled, they bring it to adjudicator. Luckily, haven't had any serious issues on our Watermain rehab project that we haven't been able to resolve ourselves, so hasn't got to that point.
So the other question, I guess, is very similar to the previous one, and that's, have they had any projects, or have you guys had any projects go to mediation or litigation at all? And I believe, Adriano, you answered that. Maybe if you wanted to go into a little bit more detail.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on the project and the scenario, right? Like I've experienced the contractor putting in large claims, like I'm talking about over $2 million claims for the client, which, I mean, at the end of the day, it depends on who the client is, and sometimes they'll balance it out with different projects that, hey, like we have this project coming up, we'll kind of give you a chance at it instead of paying this amount, or like they have different things in place. Like there's something called liquidated damages in contracts, which means after so many days or after a certain deadline date, the city or the client might be, or is allowed to charge back to the contractor that they're, for so many days that they're delayed, they're going to be paying this amount per day, which in some projects and some municipal projects, it's a very hefty amount. So that kind of works out. Sometimes you get a wash out of what's being claimed by the contractor, and then what the liquidated damage comes out to. What my experience, it's always kind of worked out at the end. Both parties come to an agreement. Never seen it go past that. Any other questions?
No, it seems like these are the questions that we have received from the people who are attending. Again, as Faria mentioned, if we have any other questions, if you guys have any other questions, feel free to email us or the speakers directly, and I'm sure you can take this discussion offline. I would like to again thank the speakers for taking the time to do this presentation. I find it great. They did similar presentation at WSP, but I didn't have the time to attend it at the time, and that was great for me as well. Faria, thank you for helping me co-host this presentation. So to just close off, again, the recording of this presentation, we will post it on the OPWA Young Professionals webpage. And if any of you wants to join our group or you want to learn more about the OPWA, please feel free to contact me. You have my email from the invite, but also my contact information is on the webpage. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. I hope you have a great long weekend.